Okay. So, hi, I'm Catherine Buckley. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate in the UCSD Gulf War Veteran Legacy Project. Dr. Galam is also on this call, and there's a chance that she will interject with any questions as well. We're just so thrilled to talk to you today, and you're among our early interviewees.
My name is Jason Gilligan. I'm a director of business development inside of a defense company where I'm highly involved with all military pilots within the U.S. military for fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft, and then also with Ministry of Defenses and militaries that are part of our allied nation partners. So I went into the military. I was US Army Aviation. I joined as a helicopter mechanic, but part of that also meant being a door gunner. And so I went to Fort Rucker, Alabama for my initial aviation training. And then from there, I went to Fort Hood, Texas. I went in as an enlisted member as well. My goal was to become an officer, but part of the reason I went into the military was one, to see if it's something I wanted to do. I was also recommended for the program to go to West Point. But again, that's 4 years of, actually 6 years of follow-up commitment post education. So while I was in the military, I, of course, went to the Gulf War, served there for 9 months, was administered various different drugs. Some were supposed to be preventive measures from BP tablets. Some other things were more or less forced upon us that we did not want to take, but we were told you'll be subjected to Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is Article 15 plus if we refuse the anthrax shot. So that's the quick narrative on the military side. After I got out of the military, I did get an aviation science degree, also got an accounting degree, and then also went and got an MBA. So there were some challenges along the way that I ran into. As a very high performer in math, there were some periodic things that would pop up that would become challenges, but I learned to come up with coping mechanisms to deal with that. I went into semiconductor high-tech business. I was involved with, I was a director of business development for a software and hardware engineering company. Then from there, I went up to Alaska to work with some military and oil and gas programs. Then I came back into Texas, went back, believe it or not, into a defense-related company. And I was a director, senior director there with Textron, is a member of the Advanced Test and Electronic Warfare group. I was highly involved with U.S. military from that position as well. And then I was also aerospace program manager for another company. And I still get involved a lot with the US Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. I have meetings at the Pentagon, and I have a number of people that report to me to ultimately create success in our organization. So that's the thumbnail narrative on me.
Wow, great introduction. It sounds like you have done so many different functions and just really done a lot.
Yeah.
And so my next question was going to be about your job within the military and your functions and roles, but you've really covered that. If there's anything more you'd like to add.
So obviously when the Gulf War kicked off, I was in a unit that was called AVIM, which meant Aviation Intermediate Maintenance. So there's AVIM, AVIM, and Depot is the way that aviation organization structured. So I was part of Foxtrot Company, 227th Aviation Regiment, 1st Cav Division. We were deployed, as I recall it, in the September time frame. When we got in country, the first 15 days we spent in port, and that was primarily to get climatized to the environment. I think when we landed, it was maybe 110 degrees, hitting upwards of 115. So we pretty much just stayed there, took it easy, showered, played games, chess, and so forth. After we went through the acclimatization aspect, we then went to our AO, or area of operation. I was in a unit that happened to have about 245 people in it, and because of what our mission set was, we were not affiliated with the larger contingency of any of the military. So if we say 1st Cav Division, which has tens of thousands of people in it, they had one area of operation, but we were away from everyone else. So we were an entity unto ourselves. What that permitted for us to do was fly in and out of different operations, provide support elements, If helicopters crashed during any types of incursions, we would fly in, recover them, or destroy them as needed, and as we had to do in some hot zones. After that initial setup, when I say set up, I'm implying getting our area of operation configured. That includes getting your perimeter established, guard points, hangar, tactical operations center, and you basically become operational after that. In preparation for what we were not certain about, being the actual war itself, we were provided with BP tablets to take on a daily basis, and that's, I'm probably chopping the name up, but that's the bromine progesteride. And that was supposed to give you maybe another 15 seconds of reaction time if we experience a Scud missile go off in our area, which is basically a gas agent. And I actually still keep in touch with a number of the guys in my unit. I don't know how many of my unit fellows have died, but I know of at least 10 of them. Unexplained deaths, some cancer related, some are just unknown. So my experience from taking those BP tablets, usually within the first hour, I would get a splitting headache. It was quite bad, and sometimes it would put me out of commission. But to the point and detriment that you still had to push through it. You had a mission to achieve, and that's just what you had to do. One of the other elements, and it wasn't until we moved to our second area of operation, we were also told we were going to be issued another shot. We didn't know what it was initially. And then we found out it's going to be anthrax. The irony, a lot of us thought, is there's no animals around here. We haven't seen any animals. We were flying all over the area. And for us, it's, well, if we don't see this and there's no obvious explanation for pathogens to be in the area, why would this be done? So a number of basically saying we're not taking it. A letter was actually handed out to us. It was a classified letter basically saying you're not to talk about this. You're not to write home about it. You will take the shot. If you refuse to do it, you will be subjected to UCMJ, or Uniform Code of Military Justice. They had basically a shot station set up, had a line of people there. You would sign your name and get the shot and move on. I didn't notice anything right away, but I did start getting sore joints occasionally, but I figured, well, it's a high stress environment. Maybe it's just part of the territory. And then after that, we stayed in that area of operation for, I don't remember the length of the period, but then we also moved to our third AO, which was in the neutral territory by Kuwait, Iran, Iraq, and that allowed us to fly into the battlefield environment, retrieve aircraft, or create a mission, or run a mission if we needed to, and get back out. I flew into a couple of the tank battle environments, and obviously what you expect to see in a war is a lot of decimation. Also went by the highway of death, where it's just I don't know, miles of hey boss.
We can move on from that question if you'd like.
No, it was death and destruction. That's the way I put it.
Wow. Wow. So those were some of the exposures that you had, the shots and the BP tablets. What about did you ever take the BVAX?
I don't recall. We were administered before going to theater when we were at Fort Hood. I recollect upwards of, I may be wrong on the count, but it seemed to be around 21 different shots, all administered within about an hour. So it was, again, lines, and it was air injection shots. And I've tended to keep up on information where the implication is there's potentially hepatitis C that's carried with that. And one of the ones, probably the most painful one, was the gomoglobin shot, which is injected into the buttocks. And that was sore for several hours. You couldn't sit down. If you wanted to, you had to basically lay across your bed. And then you had very sore shoulders for several hours after that. And I don't remember the primary reason for all those shots, but basically is you're getting them, we're getting ready to go be deployed for combat, and this is to protect you. I think even when they were administering so much in such a short period of time, I saw it as being problematic. I was wondering what were going to be the results and implications. Do the different drugs interact in a bad way with each other? It's going to be problematic. So that was certainly my concern and a number of other people's concerns.
That totally makes sense. What about any chemical exposures? Were you in a region where chemical alarms went off or around any major pesticide use?
Pesticide use, no, but we did have our chemical alarms go off one day. It happened to be roughly 115 degrees out. A Scud missile landed about 10 miles from us, and we weren't sure if it was from the Scud because we did hear the explosion from it. But we did get in our MOP 4 gear, which is your mission-oriented protective posture, which is your full chemical suit. We were in that for several hours. We also ended up going into our bomb shelters, which are somewhat underground. Within that suit for that long of a period of time, it is in excess of 120 degrees. The kind of the interesting thing is when we did finally get all clear to remove our mask, it was almost like somebody was pouring a pitcher of water down your face. There was so much sweat contained in the mask. Some of the other things that we had go on around us were different ammunition sites were exploded. I don't know what type of explosives were used to detonate them, but that was part of the mission as well. And then, of course, in the battlefields, there was a number of different sable rounds or sable round shells, and that's a uranium tip explosive that's used to basically be a tank killer. Within the overall environment itself, also, we had burn pits. Every unit had a burn pit and everything went into it. You name it, if it needed to be burnt, that's where it went. Also for the latrine areas, that's, all that material was burned. It was mixed with diesel fuel and burned, and that would burn for several hours. But I think one of the things that was more noteworthy was when the oil fields were lit on fire. What would have been a sunny day is basically blocked out. It looked like night. And I had some photos from that as well. One of the folks that I keep in touch with from time to time was our platoon leader. And she had even mentioned, she says, yeah, I actually got some photos from when the oil residue was so thick it was running down the walls of our hangar. And that's what we were breathing for days. And so even when we would wake up in the morning and blow our nose, basically it was black soot that was coming out. So another one of those items that we were wondering, what's this going to result in years down the road?
What about any infectious agents that you or anyone around you may have been exposed to that you know of? You mentioned that there were not a lot of animals in the area.
Yeah, the whole time there, I only saw one camel. I saw a sheep herder when we were flying out to one of the POW camps.
Moving on to the illness component, when did you first realize that some veterans might be having health problems?
Well, after the first set of bromine tablets that I was taking, I was thinking, why should I be taking a drug that's causing me this much pain? Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, I still keep in touch with a number of folks and ask them, I said, do you guys experience the headaches? I still get headaches like that. And I got one relatively recently that puts me out of commission. And this is the first time I had one that woke me up from dead sleep, because normally what happens, if I feel a headache coming on, I take 2 migraine Excedrin pills. I carry 2 of those with me all the time. I keep them in my pocket. I keep them in my vehicles. I keep them in my computer bag, because if I'm not able to head that off, I'm done. And it's quite painful to go through. And the way I've described it to my civilian doctors, I said, when you get those, you just wish you would drop dead. It's that painful. Not that I'm a threat to myself, but just trying to metaphorically explain to somebody what it's like. And that's the best analogy. With other guys in the unit, while we were deployed, it was usually just the headaches and some of the other basic pains that we chalked up to being in that environment. We weren't trying to draw a conclusion of why it was happening. We just knew it was, and then hoped it would go away.
What kinds of symptoms were originally reported? You mentioned some with the BP tablets, and others, but were there any others that maybe afterwards that developed or anything like that?
I mean, post-war?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So one of the first things that I had noticed with myself was I had gotten a mole, surface mole on my foot, and I thought, well, that's kind of peculiar. And then I started seeing more and more come up. I went to the not the VA, but the TMC, or Troop Medical Clinic, and their explanation was, well, just think of it as a barnacle, you're going to get them. And that happened, the first one at 21 years old. I now have countless quantities on my body, and the VA, even when I was getting ready to get out of service, I showed that to them, and they said, oh, that's from being in the sun. I said, look, I'm very fair skinned. I'm not somebody that lays out in the sun. And even to the effect of the doctor, he has a caustic personality, to the extent of, he said, well, you guys are running around with shirts off. I said, this was not Vietnam. I said, we were dressed all the time, sleeves down, because we knew the sun was going to be a major factor for us. So if anything, if you're going to try and draw a correlation of why I have moles, then it would be my hands and head, or my hands and face. That's it. Not the rest of my torso, arms and legs, and so forth. So that's one element. The other was the extreme, I can't underscore that enough, the extreme joint pain that's experienced throughout my body. Name it, fingers down to toes. It's like you could feel that the pain is almost like the joints are being pulled apart. The muscles were quite painful. And I used to be a highly active person, very conscious about what I put in my body, physically fit to the extreme of where I ran a lot. I was one of the best. I was actually, out of 248 people, I was the best runner, second best runner in the company. So my 2 miles, I used to do that in 11 minutes and 15 seconds. And as I got back, I just found that I couldn't run. I could not keep the endurance that I used to have. And then some would try to attribute that to, well, you're getting older. Well, at 23 years of age, I still should have been able to perform fairly well. But again, the pain that radiated from the joints, and again, I explained that to my civilian doctors, it would be almost better if you could just amputate the limbs and have that pain go away. You still had back pain and so forth. And when I brought this up to the VA doc, as I mentioned, when I was getting out, he said, I think what the problem is, you guys see this stuff on the news and you're trying to make it your own. And I said, are you trying to say we're suffering from a placebo effect? And he says, yeah, exactly. And that's when I realized I was going to be talking on deaf ears. And I said, I'm pretty much done with the VA. They took that as, you don't really have problems, you're making this stuff up. And that's an issue I've ran in for 25 plus years. So I'm 50 years old now. I got out 4 August 93. And before I got out, it was the first experience with the VA in Waco. And if I were a different person, I would have liked to have punched the guy. I found it very insulting. And I was thinking, what's the point of having the VA going to them saying, here's what the issues are? So as I mentioned, I stopped going to them. I decided I would revisit. I don't remember if it was months or a couple years later, but their comment to me was, well, you disappear off the radar every once in a while. I said, what's the point of going to visit you if you're going to say things are in our heads and all you want to do is issue a drug to take care of it? I said, I want you to get to the systemic issue and at the root of the problem, and let's look at that. Then I was labeled as hostile. So it was kind of interesting to me each time I went in that the way the doctors would talk to me is almost like, oh, he's going to explode. I'm never one to yell. I've always been very level-headed, very calm. And the reason for that is I believe if you lose your cool, you lose fair judgment or your sensibilities. So again, I avoided the VA for quite a while. I went back in again, and yet again, it was almost like a tracking thing. Oh, you disappear out of the system. And that's when I realized it started becoming a game. So by going there, I had to be almost report in, and it was almost like they were trying to collect the data of what do these different drugs we administer cause the soldiers. And that's almost where it started feeling like we were guinea pigs in the grander scheme of things, and let's see what the cause and effect is over a long period of time. Because it felt like almost a how dare you leave the VA system and not let us know, what you're doing, whether it's within your civilian world, what drugs you're taking, what alcohol consumption levels do you have, and so forth. And that's what it always felt like as a science project. As I mentioned, I was very health conscious. I still try to be. I don't really drink much. I might have, in a week's period of time, a little bit of alcohol, but last time, I guess for the sake of this commentary here, that I had an excessive amount, that's back when I was probably 22. So alcohol is not a thing for me. And the point of this is I try to maintain a healthy body, and by being able to pull back the curtain, by being able to say I'm relatively healthy in terms of trying to stay fit and don't consume alcohol and drugs and so forth, these pains are not a side effect of that. It's highly attributable to my Gulf War experience.
What has been, you've mentioned a lot of this, but what have been any other impacts of this illness on your life?
I used to be a relatively extrovert person. Now I'm INTJ, and I've tested myself out a couple of times. And then with each employer, also I go through different personality profiles, and it's to really gauge the person. I guess you could say I'm at the top of my game in terms of what I do. I have to stay engaged with people, but it's very exhausting to me. When I'm finished for the day, I have to step back, recharge, and kind of decompress. But I think the better optics in this is, what was I like when I first came back? I didn't want to be around people at all. Matter of fact, when I first got back, it was very hard to adjust to see that there were two different worlds going on. There was the world of the military and the wars we were fighting, and then the civilian world. The civilian world, when I came back to that, it was almost like, nothing was happening in another part of the world. And then you go from carrying a weapon all the time, a gas mask, and then trying to decompress from some of the things we had seen and done there. When I did get back stateside, my parents wanted to take me out and do a number of different things, and they could not understand why I did not want to be around other people, or why I didn't want to go in and see, Williamsburg, the different buildings in there, just because I was hyper aware of my surroundings, and that becomes very exhausting. I'm still hyper aware of my surroundings, and you've probably heard this from different TV shows and so forth, that the soldier goes into a restaurant and wants to sit with his back to the wall. Well, guess what? That's true. You're always looking for, what is the escape route? Where do I have to be positioned to respond to something if something happens? And I would be one of those people that get myself involved. I have the ability to defend others, then defend those that can't defend themselves, and I'll do so. But the hyper situational awareness is very taxing. Where I am now in life, as I mentioned, I don't yell, but I get agitated very easily. And even my daughter recently, who's 20 now, she says, "Yeah, Dad, you can be intense at times." Now, that wasn't me or her directing that at me. It's just that's what I project, because I'm focused and always aware. Yeah, it'd be nice to take a break from that. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did. I was also going to ask about any impacts of this on your family. You mentioned your daughter.
So there's nothing relationship wise. I actually have a terrific family. I have two daughters. One is 22, very bright, both of them, to the degree that she's now living in Japan. She speaks, reads, writes Japanese, and that was her goal. And she picked that up a little bit from my business travels. Both my daughters are highly well adjusted. I was always about education. Don't tell people or don't let people tell you what you can or can't do. Go beyond and above what expectations are. And if you succeed or fail, that's on you. Or if you fail, that's on me. And if you succeed, that's because of the people around you. So if I were to have one of them come around right now, I think they'd say, yeah, Dad's been a good dad. But he's very serious all the time. kind of quirky from time to time as well. But when some of the physical ailments come into play and they've seen me in the pains of, now I have to go lay down or I have to take myself out of this environment just because it physically hurts.
Yeah. Thank you so much for answering those questions. We're moving on to the physician attitudes section.
Okay.
You've gone into this a little bit before when you mentioned when you first came back and the VA experience. But my first question on that is, what kinds of attitudes have you encountered about your illness?
You're breaking.
You did address that pretty well. You don't have to necessarily say more than what you've said already, because I think you gave some really outstanding, illustrations of some of the kinds of attitudes.
I'll be glad to elaborate a bit more. So I said my piece about the VA. It was denial, denial, denial. As I mentioned, I would use my civilian doctors and visit them. And of course, I always want to try to establish what your background is. And I would explain some of the things I experienced. And just to be quite candid, they didn't know what to do with it. They said, we're not sure how to help you out with that. And some of them would even come with the aspect of, I don't know if I believe it. So the information is documented, and that's a lot of the information that I did submit to the VA in terms of data packages to provide for whatever ailments that I want them to review. And talking with other folks, when I say other folks, I've looked at different studies because I want to be involved, not just for myself, but for fellow soldiers and future soldiers. So the first positive experience I would say was, with yourself, Dr. Gilligan, and your staff. I was thinking, wow, this is fantastic. Here's a group that's truly trying to make a difference. They're trying to understand what is at the root of it. Is it personality? Is it psychological? Is it some other attributable factor that you have to peel back the onion and understand what's happening there? So because of that, I've been willing to spend my own money to fly out to California and participate in the studies and even participate here as we are right now. So that's essentially what my experience has been.
Let me take a minute to tell you how much we appreciate your participation and how honored we are that you have, been willing even to spend your own money. We will try to look into whether we can find any veteran organizations that will help to pay for those kinds of costs, because it's really, unfortunate that you'd have to spend your own money. But again, we're incredibly grateful, that you not only served your country with valor in the Gulf, but then are serving your current veterans with valor now. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So the next question in this section, you've mentioned maybe a lot of negative experiences, but what about your best or most standout experience with physicians? Dr.
Gilligan, best experience, gives your, demonstrating a knowledge-based collection. That's been the best experience. And I think my first contact with the program is, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And I forgot what the connection was. I don't know if it was through Facebook or if I saw an ad. But anyway, that's the best. The worst was with the VA. I've been involved with the VA for 25 years. I dread going to the VA. Matter of fact, the closest VA center is Dallas, Texas. Right now it's Dallas, Texas. I went there once, and that is a caustic environment, and it's really quite sad. I even told my wife, I said, you need to come with me one time so you can see what this place is like. And when you're in the military, a lot of these different positions, rank structures, and if somebody's in a troop medical clinic, they look at it as, I'm here serving you. It's a very rank-oriented element. So sometimes people, I think they see it as a power position, which is kind of bewildering to me. But then, they're supposed to be there as a public servant, but I think a lot of them still think they wear their rank, whether they're civilian or ex-military. And I was thinking, if you want to make this about education, look, I'll have a throwdown with you. I got a lot of education. So let's look at this as we're trying to help each other out. But that's not the environment there. There's another VA operation in Fort Worth, which is a 67-mile drive for me. And I go there every single time that I can because it's welcoming. It's a complete different attitude that people, I think they really do look at us there in service to a larger group. And because of that, when you look at the infrastructure, the people, I will take that any day over going, driving half the distance to where I have to deal with attitudes. I'm not going there because I want to, I'm going there because I have to.
Do you think
Let me just interject to say that's incredibly useful information to know that there are, you know, also some really outstanding, it sounds like, VAs out there that somehow have inculcated the right kinds of attitudes. That's incredibly useful information.
Good. Yeah, and I'll even add to that. P.A. Carter is the fellow that I see now, and he happens to, he's my age. He's, I believe, military reserve now, and he strikes me as somebody that's there because he cares and he wants to help people. So that I agree with you. I'm in violent agreement with you. That is one of the great things to have people that make that engagement better.
Yeah. Would you say early attitudes have evolved over time, or have they really stuck around? Your experience with medical professionals.
I would say the VA in general is the same. You know, if you start looking at budgets, whether it's congressional budget, how monies are allocated, pay and so forth, you know, if the government's having to pay out, you look at the budget, right? So the Congress awards a budget to the VA of X amount of dollars. And then that gets allocated into different budget lines. And if you start looking at where the money gets spent, you know, hearing loss is one of the biggest, if not the largest cost of VA. So then when you start going in and saying, hey, I've got problem X, Y, or Z, you know, I don't know if it's an unspoken message in there, but basically that's where the deny element comes in. And then you have people like me who look at this and go, okay, this is becoming a game of Stratego. And if you need me to fight the fight for 20 years with you, I will. And it's, again, not about me. It's about a mindset, an organizational structure that presents itself as being there for the veteran, but I don't believe it is. And I think a lot of other veterans say the same thing that I've spoken with. They said, I'm never going to the VA again. And it's just absolutely insane to deal with them. You know, case in point, even with one of my, I can't even think of the term right now, but for one of the issues I was having, I got rejected. I went through the VA track to go for a hearing at VA Waco, and this has maybe been a year and a half. And the guy is very boisterous, obnoxious to a point. I was saying, oh, I guess you're afraid of me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So that's the aura they're trying to present, is this element of fear. And maybe a lesser person would have been intimidated by him. But I said, look, I've been yelled at by generals, so I'm not concerned about you. And it almost became a rank structure intimidation element yet again. And I'm thinking, what is the point of going through this? You know, it just made me think of something else. Within the counties that individuals live, there's an appointed individual that's supposed to be the I can't remember the designation, but it's basically an officer that's there as a go-to person. And I contacted the one in Rockwall County once, and that guy was a piece of work too. It got to the point where he says, you're going to refer to me as sir. And I said, pardon me? He says, you're going to call me sir or Mr. So-and-so. And because I addressed him by his first name, he didn't like that. I said, look, you're no longer in the military. I'm no longer in the military. Are you not here to help me? And he said, well, first thing you're going to do is address me as Mr. So-and-so. So thank you very much. I think we're finished with this conversation. So to answer your question, Catherine, has there been a change? Not really. I think that's the marketing message they want to get out there, is that they're hearing the veteran. And I get a lot of letters from the VA asking me to fill out different things. I'm thinking, what for? You're asking me to give up my time, which is very precious and important. And you want me to fill out a form to make you feel good, but there's no real change coming from it. So no.
You've mentioned some of these, but what were some high or low points in relation to your illness or treatment?
The low points are the 25-year battle I've been going through at the VA. Them losing records. Fortunate for me, I had the wherewithal to make a copy of my troop medical clinic record before I got out, because I was thinking I could see this disappearing. And sure enough, once they said, "Oh, sorry, your record's been lost." So my commentary was, well, thank goodness I thought to make a copy, and I got multiple copies of that copy as well. So it's been a very long haul that's just ongoing. High points of it, I wish I didn't have to be having this discussion. I wish I didn't have the issues that I have, but that's my reality. So if I'm going to say there's a high point to it, is understanding that Dr. Gilligan's study for this has been something that I looked at going, okay, I'm going to give this a try and see what comes from it. I even told my wife after the first visit, I said, this is different. I think there's a positive to be found in here. And so two extremes.
So in the different battles you've had to fight about your illness, if so, who were main allies or foes in that? And did you perceive policies or politics to be involved in any way, not necessarily on a certain side of the political aisle, but individuals on either or both sides?
Policies and politics, yeah, and you know, being agnostic to a party, yes, absolutely, because you know whatever money's tied to, there are people that have benefits from that. You know, even when I deal with the current military, some of the things I'm involved with, I said, look, you know, your organization, and I won't say which branch of the military, has spent $20 million with us to get this product developed. But now you're saying, no, we're not going to pursue this. And I said, look, as a ex-Army aviator, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. And they actually kind of retracted a bit, even took somewhat offense to what I had to say. And I even brought the fact that hearing is a big issue with the VA. And they said, look, we have to do what we need to do. The VA gets their own money, and that's how it goes. They can deal with the soldiers after the fact. So it seems that everything's tied to money, whether it's the preventative measures, post measures, dealing with the folks like me after the fact to either get us to be quiet or actually address a problem. I know there was a second part to your question, but I've forgotten that.
Oh, anyone who's been particularly helpful or unhelpful in dealing with this and in figuring things out.
Yeah,
in the sphere of policies or politics, or
sure. And this is, I guess, going to come across as somewhat verbose because I've said it you know, time and time again. But I would say the VA has been the least helpful. Again, pulling policy and politics into it, whatever they have going on in the background. There's obviously a dichotomy between which location you're dealing with, what is the makeup of their staff, and then again on the positive, dealing with the goal and research.
In terms of treatment, what measures have you tried or taken, and how did those work out for you? And also, have you been involved in any research trials?
Okay. So as I mentioned, I try to be health conscious, all the way from what am I eating, what am I not eating, what types of activities am I involved in. And so even early on, I would try to correlate, is there a particular food that might be exacerbating the situation? I even was recording for a period of time, handwritten recording, you know, temperature outside, what foods have I eaten? You know, and as a matter of fact, I drink tons of water because I've always believed that's a part of, you know, a good chemical makeup. Recognizing there's also a point of you can drink too much. But anyway, I was trying to figure out for myself, what is there that I could do since I wasn't going to be getting the help from the VA that maybe I could make a difference. Yeah, and then you know, using one of the VA's things they love throwing out is wax and wane. Matter of fact, they'll say, "Hey, because you wax and wane, this isn't really a problem. You're making it up." So then after that, you know, I'd also take vitamins and so forth, anything that I could do to, you know, think maybe I have a deficiency or something. But it really came down to how can I stop the joint pain, the muscle pain, the headaches, and there hasn't been a way to do it. I've even gone as far as becoming a vegetarian, thinking, well, maybe there's something else that's a chemical byproduct, whether it's in beef, chicken, fish, what have you. Felt a little bit better, but still nothing that I could put my finger on and say, this is the cure-all. Even went as far as holistic doctors. One of the MDs, I asked him why he got into the particular line of business he did. And he said, I've been an MD for a long time, or I was an MD for a long time. And it seemed like we were always throwing drugs at the problem instead of understanding the root cause. And he said, so that's why I'm going to this holistic environment. All the way from doing the peroxiding, oxygenation of the blood. I tried that for a while, where they would drip hydrogen peroxide in, whatever that mix was. They were checking to see if there's what they were calling sticky blood because of gluten. I also did a heavy metals test to find out if there was anything, again, under the surface that was causing these problems. And then that came along, of course, with a course of different vitamins and so forth of their own making. So then I'm going, oh, great. This is just, again, another byproduct of, we'll get you involved. And I think there's some truth to it. But again, it did not address all the problems. And again, when you're going through that process and then your joints are so painful that you just wish the world would stop, then going, okay, well, there's nothing really coming from this. Again, different environments, from whether it's hot, cold. I think I've given pretty much everything a try. Now you could say, well, I heard you say you work out. I do, because not working out is even more painful. So I'm adopting the lesser of two evils here. Yeah, it still hurts to go through certain movements. My hands are quite painful a number of times, as well as where you really focus on where the severe pain is coming from. And there are some days that I haven't been able to get out of bed because the pain's so bad. And my wife would say, oh, it's a bad day for you, huh? So if somebody, I'm a disabled vet, I have DV plates, and somebody could look at that and go, yeah, you don't look disabled. Well, say, well, you should have seen me this morning. If you couldn't get out of bed or how painful it was to get moving, you might have a different perspective. And, all injuries aren't external scars on somebody's face. There's some of them that you have to remove the clothes to see or dig a little deeper.
Do you have any message for other affected veterans who are also dealing with this?
Yeah, the message there would be, even before you get out of service, get your record, because it will be a world of pain for you if that record disappears. You will be denied, passed off to a number of different elements, and you'll get very frustrated by that and quit the process. So first, get a hold of your record. Second, get in the system as a veteran and file your complaint. If you do not do this within a time period, they're going to say basically, hey, you missed the window of opportunity because you didn't come to us. There's obviously no problem. So statutes of limitations, you want to be sensitive to it. Document everything, have a copy of everything. Even if it's a phone call to the VA, get the person's name you spoke with. A lot of times they won't give you last name, the time of day, the date, timestamp everything. And it's very tedious work, but it will be to your benefit in the future, especially when VA tries to say, well, no, you didn't talk to us or you didn't visit us at a particular time. That's one element. The second thing, my personal experience when I was living in Maryland, I would go into the VA system, my personal login, and I'm thinking, something seems peculiar here. So I start doing screenshots of information that I had entered, and this also happened to be a little bit before the high point of claims that VA was being discredited as being a good organization. And interestingly enough, they changed dates on everything that I entered by a year. And I got screenshots of that to prove it. But again, that was dismissed. I think their view is, well, you could doctor that and create it. So even when I confronted somebody within the Maryland system, they said, oh, well, we got all new databases and that changed the dates on everything, which I don't buy for a second. So I guess the bottom line here is document, document, document.
What about a message for healthcare providers who might be learning about this or trying to understand?
Good question. I think the best that healthcare providers could do is make themselves aware, recognize there is an issue. There's not tens of thousands of people coming up with the same problematics. Hear what they have to say, even if you don't know how to respond, and recognize there's an issue. And educate yourself on the best that you can. So maybe at some point you can decide to do something about it, or start recognizing a correlation of various problems.
So that's the end of my questions. I just wanted to thank you again so much for being willing to share your experience and answer these questions. And yeah, just thank you so much for everything.
You're welcome. And hopefully, like I said, that it wasn't verbose and I was trying to be concise as I could.
No, I want to say it was a fabulous interview. And I will ask one other question to tack on before the recording goes off. Did you have any message about the Gulf War sort of for posterity, for people to know about this conflict or those who served in the future?
I've had different questions come up to me about what's my view of the Gulf War. First and foremost, I was a volunteer enlisted soldier. I wasn't forced, I wasn't drafted. Do I regret having served my country? Absolutely not. I did it because it's something that I signed up to do. I wanted to be honorable about it. If there's anything I don't like about it, it's the backhaul political deals that were potentially made in administering different drugs that were not tested, not certified, not qualified, and we were the guinea pigs. Aside from that, when I look at my service and all the training I went through, it was to perform for that period of time. I've shared that narrative with a number of folks, engineers that I've known that have their masters and PhDs that I've worked side by side with. And they couldn't understand, well, why would you want to do that? And one of them, I said, look, you've worked on your electrical engineering degree for 6 years. Think about you graduate college and then you have to repeat it, or you just get to work on a project again on something that you did as a senior project. I said, that's what it's like as a soldier. You repeat to where you become so proficient at it, and your muscle memory makes up part of what you respond to do. And yeah, it may not be the right political response to come out, but when you go into that wartime environment, you're testing your fortitude. You're testing the constitution that makes you up as a person. The takeaways from that when you're back in the civilian world are you're positioning yourself to deal with a lot of situations that a lot of people are not prepared for. Their mettle is tested. I mean, if you look at COVID as a great example, COVID for me and many other soldiers rates as a 2 or 3 on the scale of problematic, where I've got, friends that have elevated this to an 8 or a 9. So the individual fortitude, I think it develops a nice character within an individual if the person themselves has the appropriate disposition, and exercise appropriately can take you a long way in the world.